If you're an American currently living abroad, what is one time that made you realize that America really messed you up? I'll go first. I live in Warsaw, Poland now, but I always stay in touch with what's happening in the US, and I happened to hear about that Las Vegas shooting when someone opened fire on a bunch of concert goers. And it was very tragic news, but that day I also went to the movies, so I was already in a kind of weird mental state. And when I left the movies, I got on the tram again in Warsaw, and I saw this guy kind of being sketchy and acting weird in the last seat. I kept eyeing him the whole time, and he had his jacket open and he was holding something inside. He was hiding it. And I thought, my first American thought was it's a gun or a knife or some kind of weapon, and I need to move away as soon as possible. So I kept looking at him the whole ride, and then he takes it out, and it was a beer can. He was sipping it and hiding it during the tram ride. That's what happens in Poland. Not guns, not knives. And I started crying and laughing at the same time because that's when I realized, wow, that's messed up.
Oh my gosh, such a great question. I have so many. The one that sticks out of my mind right now is the first time I celebrated the 4th of July and the Kiwis were like, oh, happy 4th of July. And I'm like, yeah, suckers. We broke away from the Queen a long time ago and we have freedom and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, hold on. What freedoms don't we have? And why is it bad that other countries work together to protect each other and help each other? And America's always talking about freedom and what freedoms do you have that we don't have? And I was like, hold up. All this rhetoric that I was told my whole life, the land of the free, we need to fight for our freedom, and it's such a value in the American society. And when you think about how many countries are just as free, where does this freedom value come from? I mean, it came back from the Revolutionary War, but hello, there's a lot of countries that are free. It was eye-opening.
Okay, so I'm from the US and I live in Sweden now. And one of the first things I noticed about living here was that the guys don't catcall. So in the US, as a woman, you kind of get accustomed to guys saying something about your body pretty much anywhere you go. And here, I could be out running and I would be like expecting guys to say something about my ass or to whistle or something, and they don't. I can literally be in the gym here twerking my ass in the mirror and the guys don't pay any attention, and it's really nice.
I was working as a teacher in South Korea, and a lot of students actually have these little box cutters to cut stuff. I was kind of concerned that these were allowed in school because I was scared that people were going to stab each other.
I got this. So, American Girl, I was living in London, singing a song, rapping a song, I'm sorry, and the N-word was in it. And, you know, I'm going and flowing, and I said it. Everyone, like, stopped and was, like, staring at me, like, I couldn't believe I said it. And it was white people, but it was also the black people in the room, too. I've never felt so uncomfortable in my life.
So I spent about 4 years in Berlin, Germany, working in advertising. And coming from New York, where my first 8 years in the industry, I just, you don't take vacation. You just don't really do that. Well, I had to have a sit down with the CEO of my company and the head of HR, where they took my laptop and took my work phone and told me I could not come back to the office for 3 weeks because I had to use my vacation time. They were afraid that I was going to sue the company for not being allowed to take my vacation time. So they made sure that I literally could not work. Imagine that happening in the US. Someone literally taking your computer and your work phone away and say, go, come back in 3 weeks, enjoy your vacation. Honestly, Europe has a lot going for it that I wish Americans would understand.
So I'm from LA and I moved to Singapore. And before coming here, I asked all my friends if I should bring anything like, a pepper spray just in case anything happens. And they were like, no, that's like actually illegal. I don't think that they're allowed to have any kind of weapon. And I was like, what? We literally put them in our keychains as accessories. I was like, how do you defend yourself? They were like, from what? You don't have to. It's so safe. I was like, no way. So I Googled it, and no one is allowed to use greater force than necessary to defend themselves. What? The US can't ban guns, but Singapore can ban pepper sprays?
So I live in Paris, and 2 months ago I got hit by a taxi relatively hard. I fell down on the street. All these people came and they picked me up. They brought me over to a bench. Someone from a restaurant brought me a glass of water. Another woman gave me a handful of coins. And I was like, I don't need your money. It's okay. And she was like, sweetheart, this is your money. It fell out of your pockets when you got hit by the taxi. And I was like, Sonic the Hedgehog vibes. Great. The man who hits me goes to call the ambulance. And I said, stop. do not call the ambulance. That will cost me $3,000 to $5,000 because that's what an ambulance costs in America. And he was like, what are you talking about? An ambulance is €7. I was like, oh my God, remind me to twist my ankle on the way home from the club and they'll give me an IV so I won't be hungover the next day? Catch me at the hospital. This is lit.
I was living abroad in the UK and I had a job interview. And of course, growing up in the US, you're conditioned to dress so professional, be prepared, have your resume, and all these things. So I was like that really much. And I remember walking into the interview and they were like, oh, wow, you look really snazzy. And I was like, okay, that first of all, I never heard that before in an interview. Then secondly, they didn't even ask me anything besides, hey, Kyle, would you like a cup of tea? And I was like, okay. Never was asked that before ever in any other job interviews. We had a tea and we literally like sat and talked about all sorts of stuff, personal life, their life, and we just had a laugh for like 45 minutes. And right afterwards, they're like, you're perfect for the job. You fit great. And it was really crazy to me, and it was a really fun experience. I wish the U.S. would just chill out sometimes a little bit more.
So I spent about a year teaching English in Japan, and there was this one class of high school students I was teaching. They were seniors, they were about ready to graduate, and one of them, a very ambitious student, wanted to go to college at an American university. So I was answering questions about what it's like to go to college in the United States and kind of everyday life there, and he said, Sensei, there is one thing that I'm really worried about. And I said, what is it? And he said, how do I protect myself from being shot? I didn't have any words for him. You don't. He said, isn't that scary? I said, you get used to it.
Just one? If this tells you anything, I was only supposed to be abroad for a year. I'm on year 10. Yeah. Essentially, what I learned was me living, traveling, and working around the world was easier and cheaper than me just living in the US. So why would I go back to the US to live and spend more when I can travel and live in other countries and spend less? Make it make sense.
Okay, so I'm not living abroad anymore. But when I lived in France, I remember being amazed that they let the fucking grocery cashiers sit down to do their job. It was such a small thing, but it just made me realize how shittily we treat workers just for the sake of it, because there could be chairs. There could be fucking chairs there.
I never realized how much Americans talk until I moved to Singapore, and that was when I realized that we talk about everything. We talk about the weather, we talk about how we're feeling, we talk about what we're thinking, we talk about why we think about what we're thinking and why we feel how we're feeling. And a lot of people in other countries don't talk as much as we do about everyone and everything to everyone and everything. We also talk to everyone and people we don't know about everything and about everyone.
Oh man, I got so many stories. As you may know, I'm an American living in Italy, and there have been so many times I'm thinking, oh my God, America is so messed up. Most recently is when I gave birth to my daughter. So I decided to give birth to my daughter here in Italy, and basically before you give birth, they recommend that you meet up with an anesthesiologist. Even if you don't want the epidural beforehand, they recommend you do so just in case, like an emergency, you really want one, or etc. Comunque, so I didn't even end up getting the epidural, but I had to pay for the meeting, and I'm thinking, oh no, how much is this meeting gonna cost? It was 30 euros. 30 euros is the equivalent of maybe, let's say, like $40. And also too, I stayed in the hospital for 3 days, got completely taken care of, and I didn't pay a cent. A cent.
9 months before I moved to Ireland, I was there on a vacation, and the person I was with, we had a car. And we stayed at a golf resort kind of in the middle of nowhere because it was the off season, so it was actually really affordable. There was a gated front entrance to this golf resort, and there was a small little village on the other side of it. And because we were pretty far back on the property and it was January, so the weather was kind of crappy, we often would drive if we needed to run to the store for anything or to a restaurant. We became friends with the front gate attendant because we were in and out all the time. So one day we're driving to go to dinner, and I had asked him, hey, what's the legal limit for like drinking and driving here? I wasn't planning to do anything stupid, but I'm also a public health major, and knowing that Ireland is known for its drinking culture, I was curious, so I thought I'd ask. The guy looked at me completely dumbfounded. He's like, what? So I clarified the amount of alcohol you can have in your system and still legally drive. And he says, none?
So I lived in Edinburgh in Scotland from 2017 to 2018 to go to school. And in 2018, there was the Parkland shooting in Florida where 17 students and teachers lost their lives. I went for a March for Their Lives rally, which was put on in that country and all over the world. And a woman was up on stage and explained that in 1996, she lost her sibling in a shooting in Scotland where 17 students, primary students, died and one teacher. And the following year, there was major legislation about gun control, and they haven't had a mass shooting in a school in the UK since then, and they haven't had a mass shooting in Scotland since then. But Americans won't give up their thought that gun control doesn't work, even though there's evidence all around the world where it does.
Buckle up, kids, this one's gonna hurt. So I just moved to Italy with my boyfriend who is Italian. Going through all of his old paperwork today, and he showed me a bill from the hospital when he cut his hand open pretty badly and had to get stitches. It cost €4, which is the equivalent of $4.50.
I'm answering this, but kind of the opposite. I'm an American who was born abroad and then moved to America. We moved when I was 8, and I went from a really nice school to an American public school. And on the very first day, I came in with a snowsuit in one hand and a pair of slippers in my other hand. I was like, where do I put this down? They looked at me like, no, you don't need a snowsuit for class. What? We lived in Sweden, so if you were going to go to recess, there was a fair chance that you might need a snowsuit sometime. So I was embarrassed, my mom took it back, and then I heard a ding 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 above the speakers. When I tell you I was not prepared for 20 to 30 8-year-olds to stand up in unison, place their hands over their heart, and start chanting together, I don't think I can explain how weird that was. And then, nobody taught me the Pledge of Allegiance. From then on out, they just assumed I knew it. And that's just American arrogance for you.
Here's a fun one. So I'm teaching 3rd grade in Thailand, right? And it's sports day. Kids running around, screaming, having fun, as kids do. And I hear a bang. Instantly, my heart drops into my stomach. My entire body tenses, my adrenaline starts pumping, and I'm looking around for the shooter. And then I realize I'm in Thailand, and people don't have guns, and they don't shoot children at their school. It was a balloon. A balloon popped. Fuck you, America.
So I'm an American, and I live in Norway right now. And one time I was going to help my friend with this project that she had, and this girl was still in high school. And so she was like, yeah, just come to my high school. You can help me out, yada, yada, yada. I was like, great. Where do I have to sign in when I get there? Do I need to wear a visitor's badge? Who do I talk to? What should I tell the front desk lady? She was like, what are you talking about? Just walk in and I'll meet you at my classroom. And my mind was blown. I was like, I can just walk into your school? Like, no, aren't they gonna call the police? Aren't they gonna send out an intruder alert? Like, I can't just walk into your high school and just walk straight to your classroom. No. Then I realized just how messed up it is that American high schoolers are like security prisons.
Did y'all know that in other countries, they can go to the pharmacy and actually get what they need? I live in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia right now, and I went to the pharmacist and I was like, hi, I think I kind of have like a UTI. Like, do you have any pain medicine, any cranberry? And she's like, why don't I just give you antibiotic? And I was like, then I go back and I'm like, hi, I'm going to South Africa next week, like on safari, like any good, mosquito repellent? And she's like, girl, you want anti-malarials? And then I get bold with it, right? I go in there, on another occasion and I'm like, I'm back, I'm waiting for my birth control like to come from the US. Like it's taken a while, prescriptions and doctors and all that. And she literally threw the birth control at me. Amazing.
When my grandfather was dying, we went to Scotland to go and see, him for one last time. And at one point, my grandfather had a prescription that needed picking up. So I pop out of the car, run into the pharmacy, and I've got my purse on me. I don't have very much money with me. I just didn't. And I went in and I'm just like, okay, I'm here to pick up for my grandfather. This is his name. And I've got my passport out ready to hand it to them, like to prove that I'm who I say I am. And they're like, oh, yeah. How's John doing? Here you go. Here's his stuff. Hey, let him know that if he ever needs help with this, you can just call us. We'll send it on down to him. I said, thank you. And then I stood there and they're like, why are you still here? I was like, but I need to pay. And they're like, no, you don't. He's old. Everything's free. I never felt more uncomfortable leaving a building than I did in that day. It was awful.
So I live in Romania, and I feel like the most astonishing thing to me when I moved here was how easy it is to find someone to go out with, to go out and have drinks with, to go out and have dinner with. Any given day, somebody wants to go out. Whereas in the US, I feel like we're all so stressed out and miserable that we just want to stay home.
So I didn't realize this until I moved abroad, but Americans have a very strange concept of freedom. Like, when you're growing up, you're always told that America is such an amazing place and, it's the land of the free, home of the brave. But, I keep hearing these criticisms from people like, oh, yeah, but America has the most freedom. Wow, yeah, freedom. I mean, there may be a few exceptions or nuances, but in the UK, you're still free. Like, that is the biggest lie that Americans are ever told, that there aren't other free places. Like, I don't understand. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I feel like the concept is kind of destroying American democracy. How ironic. Like, they need to kind of understand that they need to work on things to make themselves better and more free for their citizens.
Oh, I was in Grenada for a couple of weeks, and every single day between 12 and 2, they would always close down. Everything would just close down. And I was just like, what is going on? And they were like, well, we need to go home and have lunch with our family, just enjoy, just relax a little bit. And that was when I realized every other country out here really understands the value of spending time with your loved ones and just actually taking a break, except America. America just teaches us to work for labor instead of actually living. So don't procrastinate on your happiness, sis. Your worth is not in labor. It's a luxury. Do what you want to do and be happy.
I'm an American living abroad in Thailand. We've been living here for a year now. So we literally moved here when the pandemic started. My husband had a business trip right before the country closed to Singapore. He came back from Singapore with a fever. So they transported him to a hospital. That hospital, however, didn't have the facilities for full-on quarantine, and so they transported him using an ambulance to another hospital where he was COVID tested and quarantined. Luckily, he tested negative, but he still spent 2 days in the hospital and was transported by ambulance. And so I was thinking the cost was going to be so expensive. The overall cost of it was less than $300, where back in the States, I know it would have been thousands. It's just incredible to me that healthcare is affordable.
When I was dancing in Australia, I did a jump and landed on the outside of my right foot. I sprained it real bad. And they drove me to a private hospital and I was panicking. But anyway, that's the one that was available to me at the time. And on my way into the lobby, I was, hobbling on my crutches. And they spotted me from the parking lot. The doctor came out to me before I even was in the building and went back into the hospital and told them that I was coming. In the waiting room, they came into the waiting room to examine my foot. And I never paid a penny for that shit.
Okay, I have type 1 diabetes and I lived in Costa Rica. The very first day that I was there, my insulin pump stopped working. This was like some weird fluke, unrelated to anything else. But I didn't have a doctor yet or really know where to go, so I went to a pharmacy because I needed to get long-acting insulin so I could still treat my disease. And when I went to the pharmacy, the insulin was $20 for a vial. In the United States, I pay $322 for that same vial.
I also want to add that I got the insulin over the counter without a prescription. In the United States, I have to see my endocrinologist 4 times a year to get a prescription for a medication that keeps me alive.
I'm a black person living in Japan right now. And yeah, so when you're in America and you're shopping, you're browsing, whatever, sometimes, not all the time, in my own experience, I've never had the experience of being followed around because of my skin color, because I just don't shop that often. And sometimes when I want to go get something, I know exactly what I want. I go in, I buy it, and then I leave. But here in Japan, when you go in and you're browsing for something, the employees are walking around to help you. So they may follow you, but they're not following you because of your skin tone. They're following you because they want to help you. They want to take the initiative and be right there when you need them, when you're ready to pay, if you have questions, whatever the case may be.
So I'm moving to Portugal and I have somebody that's helping me with the visa process over there. And she's asking me questions about my income. And I say, yeah, I have a full-time job and I also run 2 businesses. And she's like, that's a lot. And I said, yeah, I do work about, anywhere from 80 to 110 hours a week. But, it's what's necessary right now. I need to take care of my son. I need to manage all these different things. And I need to be able to afford, a pretty good life. And she said, well, don't you make over what the minimum is required here in Portugal? And I said, yeah, no, I definitely do. But I need to be able to take care of all those other things. And she's like, how do you have time for your son? I'm like, well, it's not the amount of time that I'd like, but that's what's necessary. And it just was really clear to me, like with the confusion, that they actually have work-life balance and you just don't work yourself to death. You can actually enjoy your life.
Dear Americans, did you realize that every single stitch of that video is either about free public healthcare system and how amazing it is, or about the fact that here in Europe, we don't really live in a constant fear of being shot on the streets? Did you realize that? I'm going to leave you with this and just think about it.